The club supporters trust called him a foundational pillar, ushering in a trophy-laden era at the club. In the city, a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading up 42 points at 76.75. The pound buys $1.18 and €1.12. LBC weather, dry and bright this afternoon with showers easing in the northwest, rain moving into Northern Ireland and southwestern areas later, highs of 12 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Sheila Fogarty.
Hello there, good afternoon to you. One of the things I think about, and I don't know whether it's doable given the relationship that we seem to have in this country with the royal family, but one of the things I think that would be healthier for everybody, for the public and for the members of the royal family themselves and their presumably exhausted press teams, is just to simplify things. I'm not entirely sure why there needs to be this battle between the royal households for press coverage. I don't need to know every dress that Kate wears. I don't need to know, every sniff and fart of what happens behind the scenes of the royal family. And it's all so curated and confected anyway. None of it is particularly the truth. Not the whole truth anyway. Any more than Harry's book is the whole truth. So I think if we could simplify things and regard them as people doing a job of diplomacy for the nation, and obviously the monarch in particular having that very strong constitutional role as well in the system that we have, things could be simpler. There seems to be too much, and again, this is something Harry has said in his interviews and in the book. There's too close a relationship between the press and the monarchy, the media and the monarchy, and that it is. I talked about the funeral and the week leading up to the funeral of the Princess of Wales, the late Princess of Wales. Something very unhealthy happened that week. Where we bullied the monarch to come back to London and to bring those boys with her. And she did, because Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell told her to, and because we told them to tell her to. That's what was going on that week, and it's sick. It's sick, and it was unnecessary, and it was not what those boys needed. That's an example of where I think the relationship is completely bent out of shape. And I think if you can set aside any of your antipathy to Harry about, and I'm deliberately kind of leaving Meghan out of this conversation today because I think what Harry's talking about goes way back to before he met Meghan. That relationship is, when it is out of shape, and I think in many aspects of it is out of shape, it does a lot of harm. It does harm to us by the rubbish we end up reading, and it does a lot of harm to the individuals in the royal family as well. I was reading an interesting piece, I'll put it on my Twitter feed later, a couple of weeks ago by Jonathan Friedland, the Guardian journalist, who wrote in favour of a Windsor-friendly republic. It's an interesting one about the harm it does to them as much as the harm it does to us. And I'm the first one to celebrate at a royal wedding and love the fact that I'm reporting on it and all of those things. I know there's a great deal of pleasure in it as well for people. But we should be mindful, I think, of the damage that it does all around. Let's talk about where reform might realistically happen, either in that relationship between the monarchy and the media, or in the setup itself, in the institution itself. I'm joined by Anna Whitelock, royal commentator and professor of history of monarchy at City University in London, and Stephen Bates is here as well, former royal correspondent at The Guardian. Good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon.
Anna, I know you've got thoughts on the media and the monarchy. Tell me where you think it's right, tell me where you think it may be wrong.
Well, I think there is this, as you were alluding to, this toxic relationship actually between the monarchy and the media. They are very necessary bedfellows, but I think there is a relationship that was cast in the 1950s, one of sort of deference and unquestioning reverence and respect, which hasn't really changed. I'm very aware that there's a great spectrum when we think about the media, from the sort of paparazzi press to mainstream media and now social media.
And it's changed a huge amount from the 50s to today, hasn't it? Yeah.
Well, it has, but at the same time, I do think there is still a phenomenon where, royal editors across the piece report where the royals go and what they do, but I don't feel that we really get an under the bonnet analysis of the monarchy about what a particular trip cost, what its diplomatic intention is, how successful it is, where is the monarchy financed from, how much they're worth, all of these things which are always slightly blurry, and we haven't really properly examined what we've got here. And a lot of that was due, I think, to the respect for the Queen and a sense that her reign was, I think, the last of its kind, and the debate about the role and the usefulness and purpose and of the monarchy in the future was sort of suspended. But now I think it really is time to consider the monarchy and the media, and I do think the media that is, loving this moment is not really looking at itself in the face as well, and thinking about the relationship it has with the monarchy, that it's spoon-fed, it's drip-fed stories. What extent does it push back and critique? Why does it have this kind of relationship with the monarchy? All of these kind of questions, beyond some of the other points that I think you make quite rightly about, does it really matter what goes on in the wider royal family, which is different from the monarchy, and I think it's important to make that distinction. Should we have, just the direct heir as the royal family, and the rest of the spares as is of course the word of the week, that they are left to go their own way and do their own thing? Is that the kind of direction we need to go in?
And it's not always clear to me why it is so difficult for the so-called spare, particularly once the older adult child has gone on to have their own kids, and that new line of succession is created. Well, I'm not clear why it is so difficult to go and just have a life and a sort of Zara Tyndall style connection to the royal family. I'm not sure why that's the case. Stephen Bates, I know that when you think of reform, you do think, not solely in, but I was reading your piece earlier on, you do think in terms of a real root and branch review of what it means to be royal. What do you own? What do you have? How can you slim it all down to be fairer? Talk to me about that, how you see it, that reform.
Well, I think the monarchy does have to be more open and more accessible. I'm not entirely in agreement with Anna about the relationship between the media, obviously the newspapers that I used to work for, and the royal family. There isn't a great deal of spoon feeding. There was a brief period about 20 years ago when Charles was trying to recover his position post Diana, and also encourage Camilla to emerge from the shadows as an acceptable wife for him in the public eye, when there was some aggressive briefing by a chap called Mark Boland. He didn't last very long, and I haven't been covering the royals from day to day for about 10 years, but the monarchy is one of the least accessible institutions in the world. Even the Pope gives the occasional press conference these days. You don't really see the monarch doing that. Now, Harry is certainly busting it open with a certain degree of gusto and relish, with the interviews he's giving over the weekend, or has given for broadcast over the weekend, and the book, and the Netflix, and the Oprah Winfrey. It's not been terribly salubrious, all of that, in my opinion.
And how...
But he's done it, so that is a further busting open of the institution.
And a question...
You have to remember. You have to remember that, as the late Queen said, the monarchy has to be seen to be believed. If people stop covering the monarchy, then the institution fades, and the evidence is at the moment that a large proportion of the population rather like to know these things. If they didn't, they wouldn't be reported.
They might, but you can see the monarch and see the royal family without knowing who's having the latest affair with whom, can't you?
Absolutely, and I'm sure they'd prefer that as well.
This is a question to both of you. If it were, it's such an ancient institution, isn't it? Over 1,000 years old. If it were to be reformed, For it to have that heft, it would need to keep something of those 1,000 years and that thread of English, in particular English history, but British history. If it was to have that thread removed, it would be something altogether different. So how do you reform it without losing that thread?
I mean, I would say it is possible, of course, to have a much more streamlined, simplified monarchy that is less about pomp and pageantry, and we can look to the Northern European monarchies, Scandinavian monarchies, to see that. But I think the point is that the British, and I'm talking about the British, but of course, the King Charles is also head of state in 14 other countries.
It's a global monarchy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really important to think about that too, and the implications